Welcome to the Handing It to Jesus podcast. This is the podcast where you learn to trade your deepest struggles to God for peace. And today, one of the questions that we want to help you walk through is in the workbook. What are 3 to 5 reasons that you haven't handed this over to Jesus? What kind of fears show up when you think about handing this challenge, this struggle over to God? It can be something that's conscious or something that's unconscious. What we want to do is create time and space here today to think about this and try to understand the depth of why this may be difficult for us.
Right. Yeah, and again, like we're working in this kind of this metaphysical field, right, where we're trying to gain awareness of what our heart is feeling and what our mind is thinking. Often these are things that we haven't paid attention to before.
Yeah.
And so some things you might have obvious answers like, well, duh, this is it. But more often than not, there's going to be a lot of unconscious things below the surface that we've not really looked at. And now is our time to kind of start peeling back the layers or the onion and figuring out, well, what lies beneath. We might have some really quick things off the cuff that come to us when we think about reasons why I haven't let this go or handed this over to Jesus. But if we sit with it a little bit longer, we might also be able to access this emotional piece, this place of fear.
Right.
What could go wrong if I did hand this over? If I let go of this, if I didn't give this so much power in my life, what would happen?
Right. And I think that, so this is going to be different depending on what your problem is, but Matt and I will walk a little bit through ours just to give you some type of example. And really we're asking for 3 to 5. You can do more if you want, but we're asking for 3 to 5 really for those of you that are kind of low ballers out there, right? So like whenever I'm working through something, I'm trying to get through it as quickly as possible. And that's just the kind of person that
to
I
get
am.
to the point,
Yeah.
to be efficient.
Yeah.
Is that it?
So
Okay.
well, one of the things that I find out is that like my first couple answers probably aren't going to have as much depth and thought as maybe like 4 and 5. So for you, just try to get an idea of like, if you need to go more than 5, you totally can. If you're someone that can get to the heart of the matter pretty quickly, that's okay. We're looking for 3 to 5 here. That way you actually get some time to sit and think about it. And really we're focusing on that fear aspect of this. There is something, this may be something that you do want to give up. So just an example, right? So like maybe it's some type of substance use, like maybe you want to give up alcoholism. And you may be like, well, there's nothing that I'm really afraid of. But sit and think about it. Maybe it's that you'll be less social. Maybe it's that you won't really have things to do. Maybe it's that people won't actually like who you are. Maybe it's that like everything will change around you. You may not have the same friends. You may not think the same. Maybe people won't like you as much. Whatever it may be, there may be things that you're like, obviously this is causing issues, but sit there and think and hover around, what is it that's actually kept me from this? Maybe for alcoholism, it's actually because I physically can't, or I feel like I can't get through it. So even if it's a struggle that you're wanting to send out the door right away, we want to sit and really amplify what are some of the reasons that we have been unsuccessful in this so far. This is part of that discern piece where we're wanting to try to understand the depth of what we're actually facing here.
Totally, yeah. And even as I'm thinking about this, like I know we're talking about it from a place of fear. You might be thinking of reasons that you're holding on from more of a positive stance because this thing gives me X, Y, or Z. And that's also a valid reason to write down because you see that it's giving you something. Absolutely, some struggle we're holding on to, a reason why we have whatever coping mechanism we do have, however our protector shows up in our life.
Right.
It's because it's doing something for us. And if it weren't there, it would potentially, that thing would be ripped away from us as well. That's kind of what we're getting at with, well, if we're talking from that layer of fear, if I were to give this up, I would lose something maybe really important to me.
Yeah.
Maybe something that I feel like is a need, something that I have to survive. And I think that's why we want to have more reasons, because you might be able to start accessing that deeper part of
Yes.
what am I really relying on in order to survive, get through life?
Yeah. And an easy example for this is like maybe for you, you recognize that you struggle with work and having a balance between like coming home and stopping to think about work and actually being present with your family. And perhaps you being that intentional about work has actually made you really successful in your job and has made you become a wonderful provider, maybe a resource for people at work, someone that people look up to. This is kind of an area that you have mastery or expertise in, so you actually feel really good about yourself. So it can have a lot of positive in it.
Yeah.
But if we're trying to hand something over to Jesus, even some of those positives can sometimes be reasons that it's hard for us to hand over, such as what Matt was saying. So I think that's a really good point.
Sure. And it makes it a little trickier too, doesn't it? Because
Totally.
like we want to thread this needle to not shame these really good things that you feel like you do need in your life.
Yeah.
And well, honestly, you probably do need them. Like, I can't remember who said this. It was some Christian philosopher, but that out of every sin that we have in our life, at the root of that, there is a good desire.
Right. I think there's truth to that. So let's walk through some of these reasons that Matt and I will list for ours. So like if you remember mine, in the outlining of the problem, right, the struggle to be a joyful giver. And if I'm thinking about like what is it that's hard for me really to be a joyful giver, what are like the 3 to 5 reasons? Then, you know, like I said, the first couple ones are, you know, kind of my lowball answers for me. So like not enough to survive, right? That I will literally not be able to provide for myself and my family. That's very unlikely, but it was my lowball answer. You know, I got family and friends here that'd be more than happy to pitch in. I got a church community that, you know, they have monthly food giveaways for people that are struggling. So the chances of that actually happening are pretty low, but that was just like my first answer. Then just kind of notice this as it goes down. I may not really be a good Christian. I may not be comfortable in my lifestyle. So like I may have to struggle or I may have to
live below your means more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It would be a sacrifice.
Then I start to get into I may fail God in some way. Right? God has this plan for me and I may not actually live up to it. And then whenever I wrote this one down, I think this has a lot more linked to it and some of them. It's like I may not really be seen as successful by other people. And whenever I get into that area, there's something that hits about that. And I think I could actually, if I chose to, and this is something we will do, is like hover around this more. And really what we want to do here is we want to try to identify some of those ones that are kind of a little heavier hitting.
And that's like, the one that hits heavier for you.
Yeah, so like for me, that one hits heavy, like failing God in some way. That one hits pretty heavy too. Not be comfortable, that's kind of in that range, but those two hit me the most.
Yeah, so two sides of the same coin, right? Of failure and success, both in how other people perceive you, how you perceive yourself, how God perceives you. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. So whenever we get to these, and if you want to sit and hover around, like maybe you're a pretty, you know, self-reflective person. Most human beings aren't. A lot of us think that we are. We're just not. It's just, you know, something about us. But like, let's say that you're like, hey, I want to practice on this self-reflection. Then you may be able to hover around this. Like if I'm not seen as successful, like what does this start to say about me? What does this say as who I am as a human, as a follower, as someone that is pursuing an intimate relationship with Jesus? And you can maybe deepen and maybe mine some more of those fears if you want to.
Yeah. Well, then I wonder for you, other questions to process as you would continue going through this workbook. What is success? What does that mean to you? What is a successful life? What does Scripture say a successful life looks like? There's so much more depth to explore, but not just on that, on, well, what other emotions does that bring up whenever you do change your priority? When you do maybe choose to view success differently or think of yourself differently or think that no matter whether you succeed or fail, that who you are to God doesn't change. Like what other emotions would come up in that moment? So there's a lot more to explore. And then, dude, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no problem.
Really
And
appreciate it.
when we get to the next section, we'll actually unpack more of these. But like I said, you're more than welcome. I mean, you can, if you're
I know,
doing
jumping the
work,
gun a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot more to explore.
well, if
This
you're
is
doing the
just-
workbook, you want to go towards the momentum, right? We're just focusing
Yeah.
on this holding on section. But of course, you can jump over to this next one and kind of mine some of those things out like Matt's
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, we'll get to that piece forming the statement in our next episode. If I can get a little vulnerable with you as well, Craig, and everyone else listening.
course.
I was talking previously about the area where I feel like I still hold on to it is this need to live in fantasy land, to distract myself, to live in entertainment, to have my mind constantly engaged and busy, so that I don't have to think about things or feel things. But holding it on I was able to reflect and get a little bit more specific. And so I wrote down that life doesn't feel very fun or fulfilling if I'm not enjoying something in front of me. 2, if I'm not distracted with something, then I'll start feeling anxious by my circumstances around me, and I'll have to wrestle with that. And that fight feels even more anxiety provoking to me
Yeah.
to have to jump into that. 3, the anxiety of my circumstances is that I can't handle it, or I'm not good enough of a man or husband or father to do any of it well. I'm failing, and I should be able to do more or contribute more. And 4, if life isn't fun or fulfilling, then it's boring and just filled with obligations, and that makes me feel depressed and feel like just a workhorse.
Right.
I would lose meaning for living. And that one feels sad to me as I hear that. I think both 3 and 4 have a little bit of a bigger heart impact as I say those, that I would feel like I'm not good enough as I more presently have to engage with real life around me,
Yeah.
and to feel like I never measure up, and that I'm always getting something wrong, never doing it to my own expectations or to the expectations of others. And the anxiety and depression, I think, would build and build, and it would feel both purposeless life, and I would constantly feel like a failure. And I think as I process that's like, well, yeah, of course I'm holding on to staying distracted so I don't have to live in that spiral, that vortex of pain and shame,
Right. I think a lot of followers of Jesus live there. So thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I think that so much of what you're going to find here is that there is normalcy here, but I think it's difficult to talk about people, talk to these things about people. So talk about these things with people rather.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that as you go through this and you list these out, you can do your 3 to 5 reasons. You can kind of see like what is some of the fears there. And like if you want to go deeper, you most certainly can. And this workbook will continue to go there, and Matt and I will walk you through there. But until then, this is the holding on section. And we appreciate you joining us on this journey to be able to go through this. And we look forward to continuing to go through this workbook with you and to try to help you have a more intimate relationship with Jesus Christ and be able to hand these different struggles over to him.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in and giving us a listen today to this episode of Handing It to Jesus. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we depend on the donations of people like yourself so that we can keep making podcast episodes like this, and so that we can continue making written content. And so we have provided for you a free workbook that you can find linked right below. You can also find linked our donation page right below. You can also find those links in our bio as well. We hope that through those donations that we are able to continue making more episodes, that we're able to continue making more written content so that you can hopefully grow closer in your walk with the Lord. We ask that you prayerfully consider partnering with us in that way if God lays that on your heart.
Yeah, and a little more about that. I mean, This is something that I personally struggle with financially, in this like scarcity mindset that Jesus has been working on with me for quite some time. And maybe you're a person like me that's been suffering in that way, and where I see different things that I want, and it always seems like money is tight. And one of the things I want to let you know is that part of our walk with Jesus is that Jesus gets us uncomfortable around those things. And so like usually what this looks like for me is I have my eye on something new that I want. And then there's a effort, there is a mission, there is a front on the kingdom's effort or something that somebody's doing that I want to put towards. And then I have that like little competition that ends up happening. It's like, all right, do I want to invest towards the kingdom, or do I want to go towards this product? And that's super common for Christians to, especially like in our society in today's day and age, to compete with. And so if you're hearing this today and maybe you feel led to give, maybe there's a movement in your heart, like Matt says, pray about that, take that to God and act on it immediately. Immediately go to the donation, and whatever God lays on your heart, allow yourself to do that, because maybe God is actually calling you to move forward on this front, to actually give into this battle, this mission that we have here. And if you don't feel that call, that's okay too. You can still enjoy the content. Others may pave the way for you. There are most certainly times in my life where things that I really enjoy and that really help me, that others have paved the way for me. And that's okay. You can still enjoy the content, and God may wrestle with you or may call you to fight on this front in a different way, or give in a different way to somebody else. Or maybe, like Matt said, it's actually just spreading the word. It's maybe telling somebody about our podcast. Maybe it's giving us a review in some way to be able to help other believers find this. There's so much content in the world and so many different things that maybe we consume maybe a little too much, and we just want to provide another avenue for believers to put the focus on Jesus, put the focus on that relationship, and to be able to spend that time, whether or not it's in the podcast or some of the written content we have, or some of the even ideas that we have for the future. So thank you for joining us in that, whether or not it's you donating to us right now, or whether it's you just letting other people know about us existing.
Right. Yeah, thank you guys again for tuning in. Please subscribe, like, follow, share with your friends, talk about us with other people. We would greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much again, and we love you. We will see you next time.